Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Kit, the Bee Bay Vet, and I'm really excited to be sharing my first results of the native bees in the Row 8 rehabilitation corridor. So, in the southwest of Western Australia, we have an incredible diversity of native bees, and we've only just sort of been discovering how many there in fact are. So, for my PhD research, and then for the years afterwards, when I was doing research for local councils, I've recorded over 250 species on the Swan Coastal Plain, which is mind blowing. But these native bees, they are very specialized, and my research really showed that the bushland remnants are absolutely essential for conserving our native bees on the Swan Coastal Plain. So any clearing of native bushland, for example, highways or road developments, is going to be taking away critical habitat for them. And people's gardens just can't replace these bushland remnants. So I have had the amazing opportunity to conduct surveys in the Row 8 rehab corridor at 7 locations, and this first survey was conducted on the 27th of January 2023 for 3 hours. And how I conduct these surveys is I use sweep netting, essentially like a butterfly net, to collect the native bees. My research has revealed this is the best way for monitoring and surveying our native bees because it is least biased and it allows me to identify the bees to species level, which is, of course, critical information. It's the main metric for biodiversity. So I discovered that just in these 3 hours, 19 species, pretty impressive, from 11 genera, 55 specimens. The Amygilla chlorocenia, this is the blue-banded bee, very common general species. Now, the Exenura, this is a genus that has no key, taxonomic key, definitely needs some revising. So that's why that's sort of a code name there. There's an Exenura. They're little semi-social bees that nest in hollow stems. Euhesma, a species there that is undescribed, and that is a little Euryglossinae, very tiny, a Euryglossula, a Xanthesma brachycera. All these are tiny bees in the subfamily Euryglossinae. This whole entire subfamily is endemic to Australia, and they are specialized. Hylaeus ruficeps calamundae. This species I found has this weird habit of sometimes nesting in polystyrene. Insulation, we've got some Leoproctus there, ground nesting bees, Homolictus, also ground nesting bees, generalists, Lipotriches, ground nesting generalist bee, and quite a few megachili. So these are the bees that will typically nest in things like bee hotels. So an amazing diversity collected in just 3 hours. So incredible diversity, but a lot of taxonomic work needs to be done still. So as I mentioned, the Exenura, there is no taxonomic key to them. Same with the megachili, there is no taxonomic key. This is very important for being able to organize and identify species. The Lipotriches needs revising, so preliminary DNA work that myself and others across the country have done in barcoding native bees has revealed that the Lipotriches flavoviridis is actually not one species, but part of a species complex. Homolictus dotatus, same scenario. 3 species that I recorded have not been scientifically described, and these are actually species that I've collected at other sites in southwest Western Australia. So it's really important that we actually scientifically describe them so that they have a name, so that they can be conserved. And the Xanthesma brachycera, which is the one that I've got on the screen here. So this one actually needs revising because it's been described twice. I've been working on a paper about this. It was described from the male as one species and described from the female as another species. So this needs a little bit of work as well. What about the sort of functional traits of the native bees that I recorded at row 8? So 63% are ground nesting. This is a greater percentage than what I found when I was doing my PhD surveys. So it could be that there's a relative shortage of cavity nesting bees because some of the trees have been cleared. So putting up bee hotels might help them. I did research installing bee hotels in areas that had lost cavity nesting resources due to fire, and it was very, very successful. All bee hotels were used, and so with Adam Peck and other members of the community, we have made some bee hotels and installed them. So I'll be very excited to see how that goes. The majority of native bees that I recorded are solitary. This is typical of our native bee assemblages and obviously contrasts with the European honeybee. And the majority were polylectic, so generalists, but there were some oligolectic specialist bees, which is really important. We need to focus on those bees because if they don't have their host plants, then they can't forage on any other flowers that may be present in the area. We also have a cool resin pot bee. I've got an image of the nest there. These megachili bees, an undescribed species again, they make little resin pots and put them on trees or bits of foliage or sticks, a very unusual nesting strategy. So these were the main plants that the native bees visited. Lots visited Jacksonia fasciculata. As you can see, also Corymbia calophylla was very popular. So these are showing that the plants that have been regenerated in the corridor are clearly really good for the native bees and are attracting the native bees. So that's some really good results there. So what do we still need to do? We need to do another survey because native bees, they have short activity seasons and their assemblage can change over the months. So to get a better picture of the full native bee assemblage, I'm going to do another survey and bee hotel monitoring. So as I mentioned, we've made some bee hotels and these have been installed and it will be exciting to see the bees using them. Taxonomic papers, this is something that really needs to be done because there are many species that are undescribed. As some of you may have known, I discovered and described a new species of native bee, Leproptys zephyr, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We also need some ongoing monitoring as the corridor undergoes succession. How does this change the native bee assemblage? Things like climate change, and there's the possibility of fire, whether it be managed fire, and also, unfortunately, there's often quite a few, fires that are lit from vandals and that sort of thing. So how does that impact our bees? Now, it's so good that this has been done because native bees are often neglected in restoration, which seems to me quite, not very good because without the pollinators plants, if we plant plants and there's no pollinators, it's essentially a dead end. The plants will grow, and if they don't set seed, then it's not a sustainable restoration project. Of course, as you can see, native bees are an incredible part of biodiversity. 250 species in this region, 19 just in one survey. So if we want to be able to understand biodiversity, native bees are a critical part of that. We do need more baseline monitoring. There's been very, very few native bee surveys, systematic ones in the Southwest. During my PhD surveys, I surveyed 14 sites. I've been surveying a couple other sites for local councils. But if we don't have a baseline when something happens, we don't know whether the bees have been impacted. Are they declining? Are they stable? We really need a list of native bees because at the moment, only 6 species in the whole of Australia have any sort of legislative protection. So if land needs to be cleared, there's no legislation saying that you need to survey to see if rare native bees are there. The new species that are discovered only occurs in 5 sites, but it's not listed at the moment, is not given any legislative protection. It only forages on 2 plant species. So very, very rare, much rarer and more at risk from something like black cockatoos. But at least the black cockatoos, when you need to clear that, you need to have surveys for them. But the native bees, they are essentially neglected because they don't have any legislative protection. So that's something that hopefully will change. And, you know, they'll need to be surveyed for any sort of environmental impact assessment. And the new species that is described, Leoproctus zephyr, as I mentioned, it's very specialized and it mainly forages on Jacksonia sericea. So hopefully we can plant more of that and see if we can expand the number of sites that this rare native bee species is located at. So to conclude, there's a high diversity in the Rohab Rehab corridor, and it shows the value of targeted restoration plantings focusing on native flowering plants and shrubs and things like that. But we don't actually know what the original diversity was. So we actually have no way of knowing whether the row 8 clearing resulted in a loss of species. And this is common for a lot of habitats throughout southwest Western Australia. We actually don't know a baseline state. And as I mentioned, most restoration to date hasn't considered pollinators. That's why this row 8 rehab is so good, in that we're looking at the whole entire diversity of the ecosystem, the plants, the pollinators, the other animals. Now, native bees also represent great indicator species because of their different life history traits. You can tell a lot about the value of a site in terms of the proportion of specialists, generalists, key taxa, where they nest, and they are vital to sustainability. If we don't have pollinators, the native plants will have limited seed set. So you can help as well with restoring native bees. Your garden and the verges, they connect these native bushland remnants. So they're really important in connecting these key habitat patches. Large patches of the best native flowers are the best way to plant. Also bee hotels, amigular apartments, and bee buckets for the ground nesting bees. And native trees, of course, are key components of the ecosystem for so many animals, and the Corymbia calophylla, Mary, is a really good one for our native bees, as well as things like cockatoos. You can also raise awareness about our native bees and focus on the native bees rather than the introduced honeybees. You can learn more about native bees in my Facebook group, The Buzz and Wild Bees. I have a YouTube channel as well, The Bee Babette. My book, Creating a Haven for Native Bees, has more information about bee hotels and flowers for native bees. And if you want to learn more about identifying native bees, I've also got a native bee ID guide and a poster of native bees. Any of my research is available on my ResearchGate as well. If you're interested in native bee surveys or presentations or in any photos or consultancy about restoring habitat for native bees, or you are a student and interested in native bees, please get in touch. I'd just like to say thank you so much to the Rehabilitating Row 8 team and the community and everyone that came to my bee hotel workshop. There's clearly such an amazing community of passionate people who, you know, have helped stop the row 8 development and help restore it, which is so important. And it's lovely to see so many people caring about our biodiversity. Thank you especially to Adam Peck for inviting me to speak today at the conference, as well as inviting me to do the native bee surveys and organising the bee hotel workshops. Thank you, everyone.